There are chairs made for kings, and then there are chairs made for monsters. But somewhere in between, in that blurred line where cruelty meets authority, there existed a chair unlike any other, a chair not built for comfort or command, but for punishment. Its purpose? Simple: to make a man beg for a death he'd once feared. It was called the spike chair. The name alone was enough to silence conversations in taverns, to make prisoners tremble in their cells. It was a throne of pain, forged from iron, carved by blacksmiths who never dared to sit near it, and commissioned by rulers who believed mercy was a weakness. The spike chair appeared in several corners of Europe during the Middle Ages, a time when justice was less about fairness and more about spectacle, when a man's screams were part of the entertainment, and public squares were the theaters of fear. Imagine it: an iron chair, cold as death, with spikes covering every inch of its surface. From the backrest of the seat, the armrests, even the footrest. Hundreds of sharp iron points, glinting in the torchlight like the teeth of a beast waiting to bite. Once a victim was stripped naked and strapped onto this metallic monster, there was no escape. The spikes were designed not to kill instantly. No, that would be too kind. Instead, they were positioned to pierce flesh just enough to draw blood, to make sitting an impossible act of endurance. And here's the most horrifying part. The executioners didn't simply place the condemned on the chair. They pressed them into it. Some versions were heated from below, iron coals placed under the seat, so the metal grew hotter with every passing minute. The smell of burning flesh filled the chamber as iron merged with blood, and the condemned writhed helplessly, trapped between fire and metal. But the chair didn't just kill the body. It killed the soul. It was used against those accused of heresy, witchcraft, treason, even adultery. The message was clear: defy authority, and you wouldn't just die. You'd suffer until death begged to find you. One such tale comes from France, during the height of the Inquisition. A name that still haunts dusty archives: Jean Lamotte, John the Cursed. Jean was not a noble, nor a soldier, nor a priest. He was a blacksmith. The irony of his fate would soon be too cruel to bear. He was accused of aiding heretics, men and women who dared to question the church's word. They said he forged tools for witches, charms, perhaps even forbidden symbols hidden within his ironwork. Jean denied it all. He was a craftsman, not a sorcerer. But words meant little in an age ruled by suspicion. He was taken to the dungeons beneath Montferrand Castle, where men didn't walk out as men anymore. There, in the flickering light of torches, stood the chair. It was massive. Iron rods formed its skeleton. Spikes covered its bones. The seat was slightly curved, forcing the victim's weight downward, deeper into its blades. Chains hung from both sides, ready to bind wrists and ankles. Beneath the seat, a hollow space, large enough to slide a tray of burning coals. Jean was forced to strip. His body, strong from years of hammering metal, was now defenseless. The guards tied him down, leather straps cutting into his wrists, and as his skin met the cold iron, his breath caught. At first, it was only the sting, sharp, needling pain across his thighs, his back, his arms. But when the executioner gave the signal, two men turned the crank that slowly pressed the seat upward, embedding the spikes deeper into Jean's flesh. Blood began to drip, a slow rain falling onto the floor below. They asked him questions. Who do you serve? Who are the witches you aid? He answered the same. No one. I am loyal. I am innocent. But innocence didn't matter here. In these chambers, truth was measured in screams. When they slid the tray of burning coals beneath him, the heat began to rise, creeping into the chair. The metal grew warm, then hot, then unbearable. The spikes turned into branding irons. The smell of scorched skin filled the air. Jean tried to lift himself, but the chains held him down. His flesh sizzled against the steel. His eyes rolled back as the pain became something beyond human comprehension, a wave of fire and agony that seemed to tear him from his body. Witnesses said he began to laugh, not out of madness, but as if laughing was the only rebellion left. He laughed until his voice cracked, until it turned into coughing, until he could no longer make a sound. And still, the Inquisitor asked, "Who are your accomplices?" When no answer came, he nodded. The heat was raised again. Within hours, Gene's body was fused to the iron. When the guards finally removed him, strips of skin remained stuck to the chair. He was declared guilty because silence, in the eyes of his tormentors, was confession enough. They buried what was left of him in an unmarked grave, but the chair had stayed, clean, polished, waiting for the next soul to touch its teeth. Over the years, others would meet the same barbarity given a throne. And yet, for all its cruelty, the spiked chair was more than an instrument of death. It was a message, a symbol that power didn't need to justify itself, only to remind you what defiance costs. By the 17th century, whispers of its existence began to fade. Some were destroyed. Others were hidden away in catacombs and cellars, left to rust. But even now, a few remain, displayed behind glass in dimly lit museums. Visitors often stare in silence. They see the spikes, the rusted iron, the cold, rigid design. They read the plaque and move on. But those who linger longer of truth. They believed that no lie could survive that much pain. And they were right, because pain changes everything. It doesn't just wound the body, it reshapes the mind. Under the claws of agony, even the proudest spirits crack. That's why the chair was feared more than the sword. A sword killed quickly. The chair took its time, and it listened. It was in Italy, decades later, that the chair returned to its dark fame. In the city of Milan, during the late 1500s, a nobleman named Matteo di Rossi was accused of treason. He was said to have conspired against the Duke. Rumors whispered that he'd passed secrets to France, that he'd spoken against the crown. He wasn't a coward. He was a soldier once, brave on the battlefield. But there's something different about seeing your death waiting, shaped like a chair. Confess, said the magistrate. Confess, and your suffering will end quickly. Matteo looked at them, Men he once called friends, and said nothing. So they stripped him. The guards tied his wrists and ankles with thick leather straps. Every motion echoed against the walls. His skin tore under his own weight. "Confess," the magistrate repeated. Matteo shook his head. His breath came in shudders. "I did nothing." The executioner nodded to his assistants. Beneath the chair, a metal basin was filled with glowing coals. The heat began to rise, licking at the underside of the iron. Slowly, methodically, the chair warmed. The smell came first, the metallic tang of blood meeting heat. Then the pain. It crept through Matteo's body like a swarm of knives, biting deeper as the metal seared his skin. His flesh hissed, his lips trembled, but still no confession. They turned the crank again, the one that tilted the seat slightly forward. It pressed him closer into the spikes. Blood ran down his legs. The pain was no longer pain. It was something else, something that tore through the limits of a human mind. He screamed now, a sound so raw it made even the guards look away. Hours passed. They gave him water, not out of mercy, but to keep him alive longer. The magistrate asked again and again and again, but Matteo refused. Not because he was brave, but because he wanted them to feel something. He wanted them to see that even in their cruelty, they could not break him, that his silence was a weapon sharper than their iron. By the second day, his body was unrecognizable. His skin blackened where it touched the metal. The spikes had carved patterns across his chest and arms. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes whispering prayers, sometimes curses. When death finally came, it wasn't sudden. It came like a sigh, slow, invisible, merciful. His head fell forward. His breathing stopped. They left him there overnight as an example. The next morning, the guards tried to remove his body, but much of it remained stuck to the chair. They had to peel him off, skin tearing like paper. Afterward, the Duke ordered that the chair be cleaned, polished, and kept ready for the next traitor, he said. And so the cycle continued. The spiked chair was not an invention of one mind, but of an age that believed suffering could purify, that pain could prove truth. By the early 1600s, records of the chair spread across Europe like dark rumors. In Spain, they called it La Silla de Hierro, the Iron Seat. In Germany, Der Stachelstuhl. Each region had its version. Each ruler had their reason. In Spain, it was said to have been used on conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity but were suspected of secretly practicing their old faith. In Germany, it punished thieves, witches, and blasphemers. In some places, women accused of adultery were forced to sit upon it. Their punishment carried out rebellion what others called justice. The governor gave a slow nod. Then he signaled to the torturer. A moment later, a brazier was lit beneath the chair. The fire crackled softly. Hungry! Slowly, the heat spread upward. The spikes began to warm. Carl flinched. His jaw clenched. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The iron began to glow faintly red. The pain grew unbearable. Every spike now a branding needle pressing deeper into his flesh. The guards could smell it, the smell of skin cooking alive. Some turned away, but the governor remained, arms folded, unmoved. Carl screamed, but no confession came. His words were replaced by sobs, then by silence. When they finally pulled him off, he was unconscious, his back and legs marked forever with the chair's cruel signature. He survived that night. Barely, but the rebellion ended. The people of Würzburg saw what happened to their teacher and learned the lesson their rulers intended. That silence was safer than truth. Still, whispers spread. People said that Karl's screams echoed to the fortress long after his death, as if the chair itself had absorbed them and was still trying to repeat them, because iron remembers. The spiked chair was not only a device, it was a warning written in steel. And rulers loved warnings more than justice. By the time the 1800s arrived, torture had been officially outlawed across much of Europe. Kings signed decrees. Churches preached mercy. Yet, the relics of pain, racks, wheels, chains, chairs, were not destroyed. They were stored, hidden away in the basements of old castles, where no one dared to go, until one man decided to bring them back. His name was Anton Weiss, an Austrian collector of curiosities. He had a fascination with instruments of death. He called himself a historian, but those who knew him said he was obsessed with how far human cruelty could go. He bought the iron chair of Würzburg in an auction in 1832. The seller told him it was cursed, that every man who had sat in it had died screaming. Weiss only smiled. Then it deserves a place in my museum, he said. His museum was really his home, a sprawling manor filled with relics of horror. Skulls, chains, blades, masks. The spiked chair was his centerpiece. He placed it in the main hall, under a chandelier, and polished it until the iron gleamed like new. Visitors came from across Vienna to see it. Some looked in fascination, others in fear. Weiss would stand beside it, describing how victims were tied down, how the fire was lit, how the flesh fused to metal. He spoke of pain with a scholar's pride, as though it were an art form. But Weiss didn't just collect history. He wanted to feel it. On a stormy night in When they lifted him off, blood dotted the chair's tips. His heart had stopped. The doctors called it shock. The servant called it something else. He said the chair had taken him. After that night, the manor was abandoned. Locals claimed they heard strange noises from within, the sound of creaking metal, soft whispers, even muffled cries. The chair was found years later, rusted, It was placed in a tall glass case labeled Authentic Torture Device circa 1500s. Tourists came to gawk. Scholars came to study. Journalists came to write headlines like When Pain Was Policy. But not everyone saw it as history. Some saw it as something more. Among those who became obsessed with the chair was Dr. Heinrich Vogel, a professor of human psychology at the University of Vienna. Vogel believed that human cruelty was a form of addiction, that the same part of the brain that craved pleasure also fed on the power of causing pain. When he visited the museum for the first time, he stood before the chair for almost an hour. He didn't take notes. He didn't speak. He simply stared, tracing the lines of its spikes, studying the rust like a surgeon studying veins. The curator, an old man named Otto, grew uneasy. "Professor," he said softly, "we usually tell visitors not to touch the display." Vogel smiled faintly. "Oh, don't worry," he replied. "I have no intention of touching it." Then, after a pause, he added, "At least not yet." Over the months that followed, Vogel returned again and again. He began writing a paper, The Psychology of Suffering and Spectacle. He argued that humanity's fascination with torture was not about cruelty, but about control. That people feared pain so deeply, they built their entire societies around who could wield it. Merged with the silhouette of the chair, and for an instant, just an instant, he saw someone else sitting there. A figure, skin torn, head bowed, chained at the wrists, the same posture he'd drawn earlier. Then the vision vanished. The chair was empty again. Vogel stumbled back, gasping. He told himself it was imagination, exhaustion, suggestion, the power of his own fascination turning inward. But deep down he knew the human mind can invent fear, yes, but it can also recognize something real, something ancient. He gathered his things and left. But he didn't tell Otto what he'd seen. Not yet. Over the following weeks, Vogel's lectures changed. His voice grew more intense, his words darker. He spoke of inherited cruelty, of how the energy of pain could survive objects, how iron, soaked in suffering, could carry memory like blood carries disease. Students whispered that he was losing his mind. One night, he returned to the museum again. This time, Otto refused to accompany him. "You shouldn't be alone with it," the old curator warned. Vogel smiled faintly. "Neither should anyone," he replied, and entered. By morning, the guards found the door ajar. Inside, the room was cold, unnaturally so. The oil lamps had all gone out. The chair stood as always, but something new stained the floor beneath it. A small pool of blood. Vogel was found slumped nearby. His body bore no wounds, but his expression was frozen in pure terror. His eyes wide, mouth open mid-scream. His recorder lay beside him, still running. The last words captured on it were his own. "I think it's not just iron. It's listening." After his death, the museum sealed the room. They claimed it was due to structural repairs, but everyone in Vienna knew better. The spike chair was moved to the basement, away from the public eye. Years later, during World War II, the museum was bombed. Fire consumed much of the building. Records burned. Artifacts melted. Yet, when the ashes cooled, one object remained intact. The chair. The firefighters who found it refused to touch it. They said the metal was cold, too cold, even though everything around it was still smoldering. So they left it where it was, buried beneath debris, until a new museum was built decades later. That's where it sits now, quiet, blackened, ancient. Tourists still visit, though few stay long. Some say they feel sick standing near it. Others say they hear faint metallic clicks, like nails tapping from within. The guards dismiss it as imagination, but they never stay alone in that room after dark. And sometimes, when the lights flicker in the evening and the hall is empty, a reflection appears on the glass case. Not a viewer, but a figure bound to the chair, its mouth open, its body trembling. A reminder that pain never truly dies. It just waits for someone to notice. In every age, every empire, every century, humanity finds a new way to make others suffer, and justifies in the name of justice, faith, or order. But the spiked chair needs no justification. It was built for one purpose alone, to turn fear into obedience and pain into silence. It is, perhaps, the purest symbol of our darkness. And even now, in a world filled with laws and light, somewhere deep in that iron, it's still listening, still remembering, still hungry. The chair's final whisper. Morning crept into the chamber, like a timid ghost, sliding its pale fingers across the cold floor. The spiked chair sat there, silent, glinting, and soaked in yesterday's horror. The iron was dark now, its cruel edges dulled not by time, but by flesh. Around it, the guards moved with heavy eyes, their faces drained of all color. The man who had once been their prisoner was gone, not vanished. His remains were still there, slumped, unrecognizable, fused almost to the device itself. But the person, the voice that screamed, the mind that begged, the heart that once believed it could endure, was gone. All that was left was the echo. And that echo lingered. For days, the dungeon master avoided the chair. He claimed it whispered when the torches dimmed. He swore he could hear the sound of breath, shallow, labored, dying, coming from within the metal. The guards laughed at first. But soon, even they began to feel it, that uneasy sense that something watched them from the shadows, that the chair, though motionless, still remembered. They said it was because iron absorbs pain, that the chair had tasted too much suffering, and now it could never rest. Kings and torturers gave it names: the seat of truth, the iron judge, the devil's throne. It traveled across borders, from one dungeon to another, carried by those who believed that true order could only be built on fear. In Italy, it was used to test witches. In Spain, heretics. In France, conspirators. Everywhere it went, the same cries echoed, the same scent of burned flesh, the same silence after. But time, as it always does, began to turn. The age of enlightenment came. Men began to speak of reason, of law, of mercy. The chair was locked away, forgotten beneath layers of dust and history. The world above moved on, pretending such things had never existed. Yet the chair endured. Centuries later, when explorers uncovered the ruins of an old fortress in Nuremberg, they found it there, rusted, corroded, but unmistakable. The spikes still sharp, the seat still curved just so, as if waiting. The archaeologists didn't understand what they were looking at until they noticed the stains. Deep, dark, permanent. They put it on display in a museum, behind glass, under soft yellow light. People came from all over the world to see it. Some stared in fascination, others in disgust. A few turned away, pale and trembling, unable to look for too long. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the museum was quiet and the last visitor had left, a faint creak would echo through the hall. A small metallic groan, like the chair shifting, waiting, remembering. Because the truth is this: pain never really dies. It lingers in places, in memories, in the tools built to deliver it.